Fantastic. Well, thank you, Francis, and good to see those who are joining us on the call. I know we're few on number live, but I know from previous webinars when Francis uploads it onto your website, loads and loads of people do view the video content at a later date. So we do really value these times together. And today we are delving into the wild world of community audits. But firstly, just let me introduce myself. My name is Andrew Clark. I'm one of the directors, owners of Church Grants. If you've not used Church Grants, then Francis has taken out a subscription on your behalf, and you can access that funders database free of charge. Do as many searches as you like, save those searches, and we've got lots of searching criteria, which I'm sure will be relevant and useful to your general fundraising practice for your church. By day, I run my own consultancy called Apostle, mainly help churches, mainly Anglican and large capital appeals, ranging from £50,000 to multi-million, 8 to 10 million pound things. Costs just seem to be going up and up all the time. So these projects appear to be getting larger and larger by the month. That's what I kind of do day in, day out. I'm usually joined by my esteemed colleague Matthew. Matthew's 2 weeks in Corfu. Lucky him. Looking out my window, I'm based in West Sussex, and it's very grey and blustery. I was thinking of even turning on my heating in my little office. But it's been good to be with you today. I'll be speaking for about 20-25 minutes, depending on how we go, and just really here for you. Really, if you've got any questions, burning questions, do type them in the chat, and if Francis feel it's appropriate, we can answer a question kind of as we go through. But I've allowed some time at the end just to leave for questions and answers, which we can talk about community audits, or although because we're a small group, maybe we could open it up to general fundraising. I'm happy to kind of field those questions as well. Okay, this is the roadmap today. This is what we'll be learning. We'll be looking all about, well, what are community audits? How could we kind of do one? What is the community we should be engaging? Often churches, when I'm working with them, ask me, why should we be doing a community audit? I practically day in, day out, I'm writing cases of support for mainly trusts and foundations, and increasingly churches need to have a really robust argument why an individual, family, or corporate business, or trust and foundation should support that local church. And I'm sure you're representative of amazing, historic, beautiful churches. They do amazing community outreach work and stuff for your local area, but you're literally one of literally thousands of churches doing same amazing work in the country. So the market is large and the funding opportunity is small. So more so than ever, churches have to be really robust in understanding the problems, the needs in their local area, and how as churches we can be part of a solution in addressing that. So that's what we'll be unpicking that today a little bit. Okay, let's get started. So what is a community audit? Well, we think it's a systematic study of what your community really needs. So often when I'm working with churches, they come to me with usually a capital project, sometimes a revenue project. They need a new post for a couple of years, but usually it is some sort of capital project, whether they're wanting a new kitchen or upgrading their WCs or reordering their internal nave, or the roof just needs repairing. Why do I need to have a community audit done to really enforce the story and the case of support, why a funder or whoever should donate to your project? Well, they are important because they find out about the genuine needs of the community and evidencing the need within that funding application. If you didn't exist, if your church didn't exist in your local community, would that really matter? Would people really care? With how and if do they value the role and the work you do within your local area? And more importantly, what's important to them? What's their kind of need, their issues, their problems that they think happen within their local area, and how can the church can be a potential solution to those problems and needs? A community audit, it is a two-way process. So it's a process that people can find out and tell you what they think and feel about your local church. I'm sure your church has been established for many hundreds of years. We all kind of change and evolve over time, but it's a snapshot of what people within your community think and feel about you as of today. You can discover what's going on in your communities. I'm sure you do lots of great kind of work and interaction with people locally to you, but it's an opportunity to find out more and to learn about the impact of COVID. It seems a long time ago now, doesn't it, the kind of COVID stuff, but the kind of current cost of living crisis, and understanding how best the church can be part of a practical solution to address the genuine problems and needs of the people living around them. That's what funders, I believe, really kind of care about. It's people's lives, it's people's stories, and the more evidence you can glean and get from a community audit process, I think the stronger your bids, the way you're communicating about your project, the story, the church, the stronger it's going to be, and how you're going to come across the potential funders. And it really gives you that underpinning why. There's a great chap called Simon Sinek. If you've not ever heard of him, just do a quick Google or YouTube. He has a really powerful concept of start with why. Start with why. Don't start with what you need. So don't start with, oh no, the roof is leaking, please give us money for the roof. Start by talking about the people who live within your community, and start to talk about the evidence and the data and the stories you've kind of gathered from chatting to people in recent times. Maybe you've been chatting to them recently and they're saying, well, antisocial behavior in our village is a growing problem, and it's a real need and issue within our local village or town. How are we going to address that? Well, we love to kind of invite young people in on a Friday night to host a youth group, for example, or have some sort of workshops they can engage with. That's how we're going to address that antisocial behavior. What do we need? Well, we actually need to fix the roof, actually, because it's leaking, or we've got a very old boiler that needs replacing. That's what we need. But if you start with the why, if you start with the problem, if you start with the need, if you start with the issue, I think that instantly becomes a more compelling reason to give money, and a compelling kind of in to your story. I think if you just present to a funder, oh, can we have £5,000 to fix the roof? That can be quite cold. It'd be quite kind of closed off. But if you start with an interesting, engaging evidence base of why you're doing this project, I believe it's going to reap more financial rewards from your fundraising generally. So that's a bit about why we should be doing community audits. And through my experience of working with lots of churches throughout a year and lots of cases of support and lots of bid writing, I think the most interesting, compelling funding bids do use evidence from the community audit process. So please do consider doing one if you've never done one before. So we largely agree that engaging with our community is good, and we like the concept of maybe potentially auditing what they think and feel about us and how we can be part of a solution. So who is your community, and why does their opinion matter? Now, I work with all sorts of churches, very small, 8 people, in a very rural setting, to inner city churches that attract literally hundreds of people, if not thousands of people. I'm working with one well-known church brand who have got lots of sites all over the UK, and they've got tens of thousands of members. So I work with lots of different churches in different church contexts. So I appreciate everyone on this call and everyone viewing this video. Your church community is going to look very different to the next church, but largely speaking, who should be consulted within your quote unquote community? Well, it's obviously your church congregation or those who live within your close proximity. Now, equally, you might be one of several churches within a geography. So hopefully you might have an understanding where you draw your people in. Maybe it's from neighbouring villages, maybe it's neighbouring districts or boroughs. What kind of geography does your community come from? Try and map that out if you can. Have you got a list of those who use the church? Often local groups, scouts, beavers, fitness classes will often rent and use your spaces, which is great money. Sustainable options for you, which is a great use of your church beyond kind of core church use. That's great. So do you have that list somewhere? Are you able to contact them, engage them in some way? And other stakeholders, can you think of anyone else who would have an interest within your kind of church? And I would say this: don't discount your local area, your local people, of the significance your church plays within your community. There was a report done by the National Churches Trust, the House of Good. If you've never read it, do grab a copy of that, because it really speaks into how secular and religious people view and value the work which churches do. And overwhelmingly, the vast majority of people within our villages, towns, cities do value the Christian church and do value the work which you do within your area. I've been working with a church in northwest London, in Harrow, and it's literally opposite the famous Harrow School. And lots of people don't necessarily go to the church every week, but the church symbolically, because they see it every day, or maybe they live in the area, it's on a very high hill, you can see it on lots of parts of London, it's very symbolic to the area and it's a local landmark. And actually the role it plays in the life of people is still very important. So I've heard countless stories of people who have received legacies or donations from people they didn't even know about or had any connection with, because still the church holds in a really important part of people's lives. So don't discount people because they don't come along every week on a Sunday morning. Why does their opinion matter? So we've kind of identified our community. We want to talk to them. Why does their opinion matter at all? Why should we be kind of jotting down what they think and feel about us? Well, these three kind of quotations, these are live questions actually from funders, which I apply to on a regular basis. And increasingly, some funders have always done it, but in recent years, lots of funders have switched on to this and actually wanting to know, how does your project involve your community? Have you talked to them? Have you found out that this is a real problem? Is the church thinking, oh, crime's a real problem within our area? Well, how do you know that? How can you evidence that? How does your project involve your community? Who have you spoken to evidence that? Equally, going forward, describe the role your beneficiaries have in the planning and the delivery of your services. How are you involving non-church people in potential social engagement work? And how will your beneficiaries have a role in shaping your project? These are real questions which I copied and pasted from funders' online portals. So funders increasingly want to know, how have you engaged with your community? How have you noted their ideas, their thoughts and feelings, and how might you use them in the future? Funders absolutely love that. If you could say, well, we've got a project board or a program board made up of all this mixture of people from the local area, the local kind of stakeholder groups, funders are going to really love that. And that's why their opinions really matter. Sip of my tea. Okay, so how can we practically complete a community audit? Now, maybe you came into this meeting with a preconceived idea of what a community audit is. How do we get that information, that data from these people? Well, you can do the classic paper questionnaire, face to face, you stand outside the church. Maybe I've heard recently some churches have a really strong presence at annual events. Maybe it's a summer village fete or a town fete or some sort of annual thing which the church could have a stall at, and passing traffic just kind of grab people and kind of get their kind of input. Telephoning people, probably less relevant to us. Maybe you can design some sort of online survey. I use Survey Monkey, which is free of charge, I believe, still, and really, really good. Also, Google Forms. If you've got a Gmail, you can use Google Forms. That's a really free, really great way of creating a quick questionnaire and emailing that out, or do the old classic print off something and post. I would want to encourage you to think a bit more creatively how we could capture ideas and information. I love the use of post-it note surveys. Sometimes I work with churches and we have a big board, either internal with the church or standing outside in the local kind of church courtyard or on the street. and having one or two questions and getting people to write something on a post-it note and popping it on a board, or having a scale. Do you agree with this? Do you disagree with this? Put your mark and use kind of post-it notes. I equally am passionate about the use of technology. And if you use WhatsApp, I'm a big fan of WhatsApp because I love the WhatsApp voice note thing. And maybe you could have a generic phone for the church, and you could have an app for WhatsApp, and you could say, text us your ideas, thoughts, and feelings. You might want to filter some of the spam or any abuse you might receive, but just using technology, make it easy as possible for all generations to communicate to you. So I love the use of WhatsApp, and you could easily purchase a SIM card and a number and have a generic phone for that. That's a great way of kind of capturing people's ideas, thoughts, and
Can I,
feelings.
can I just jump in there very briefly, Andrew, just
Of
to
course you
say
can.
I love that idea of the post-it note survey, which presumably, just because we do have a lot of rural churches in our diocese, that's something that, in your opinion, could that perhaps be left up at the back of church if a lot of the church's visitors come sort of fairly periodically, they're passing visitors, as a way of capturing that kind of light traffic, as it were? That
Yeah,
might be something you could leave out,
that's
perhaps.
that's a really good idea, because obviously churches do receive a lot of general tourist visitors walking through on pilgrimage walks, and often there's a visitor book. But allowing someone to pick up a post-it note and just pop something on a board, telling us what do you think and feel about the internal atmosphere. Is it light and welcoming, or is it dank and unwelcoming? Score us out of 10 and put your kind of post-it note there. So although maybe not traceable data, names and addresses, but it gives you a sense of feeling. You could always take a photo of it and use it within your kind of bid. The last 2 months, this is what people told us. We are swaying more to this area of the scale, which means we need to make a change here. So yeah, I would welcome that, Francis. If there's no people to staff an actual station of people to give information, maybe we can have an open somewhere in the back of your church to do that quite easily. But there's a mixture of ask open questions and kind of closed questions. Tell us what is the most exciting thing about living in Norwich, and just allow that person to kind of give that open question. Or what role should Johns play in the community of Norwich, for example, and get them to kind of say what they think and feel about that. Or then compared to kind of closed questions, yes or no, have you ever been inside St John's in the last 5 years? No or yes. That is a closed question. So wherever possible, use a mixture and allow the person giving you that information to kind of give both answers. But I mean, don't create 50-page questionnaire. No one's got time and effort to do that. Try and make it as easy as possible. I like the scale, 1 to 5, put a cross, put a tick. Short, small boxes to give a short line of text or a couple of words. It's sad really, but our attention spans have reduced so much, and our kind of time is so spread on all sorts of things. So if you are lucky enough to get someone captured to give you some valuable insight and some thinking, and do make it as easy as possible to kind of capture that information. Give you a case study. This is a church I worked with. Where are they based? Again, kind of northwest London, Primrose Hill. This church has got a brewery in their crypt. I think every church should have a brewery on site. I think I would make that mandatory if I came into any kind of position of power. But this church brewed their own kind of ale on site, which I thought was a great idea. But they had a very large internal nave space. They didn't have any fixed pews. They had flexible seating, but they wanted to use the space a lot more for youth work and youth engagement. So they were saying to me, well, carrying out a community audit is really the first practical step to prepare for fundraising, because it really gives you that evidence base and clarity of why you're doing that project. So it really did crystallize the why within that kind of project kind of context, the why, the how, and the what. And the data they collected, the stories, the feedback, the quotations, the case studies they kind of gleaned from that process, they did use within their funding bids and their case of support. I think this was a local community engagement event which I invited people to, and I think I gave away samples of their ale. So that's a good hook if you could get people in with a promise of free liquor. That usually does help, or a few nibbles maybe, if you're not that way inclined. But yeah, just a really interesting way of cultivating the local community. Invite them to something. Maybe you have an annual event or an annual something. How can you start to cultivate a meaningful engagement with individuals, families, businesses, other stakeholders within your community, and start to gather and capture their thoughts and feelings? So maybe you hold some sort of event, maybe you have a month where you're engaging with your local community, you're kind of getting all this data in, all this really great useful information. What's that data telling you? So can you see any emerging trends or themes, or people saying, well, it's just nothing for older people within our village? We know loads of people who don't even speak to anyone during the week. Or, there's 50 young people hanging around in the park all weekend doing nothing, antisocial behavior. So what is the problem people are telling you? And then crucially, how can the church be then a solution to that problem? How could the church be involved? What could they do? What could they host? How could they partner with someone to deliver something meaningfully? Because as churches, our USP, we are custodians of these amazing assets, aren't we? I mean, these churches are big, usually with great spaces and often good facilities, if not need a bit updating and modernizing. But we are holder of these great assets. So how can we use them beyond the core Christian worship and core activities? And how could we partner with to deliver great stuff for our community? It's also a great way of bringing people from the fringes to the centre and actually bringing them on a journey. And maybe they've been walking past your church for decades, and maybe they've never even gone inside. Maybe they don't even know what you do or how you operate. It's a great way to get their details, actually. So filling out your questionnaire, your survey, get their opt-in contact details. Say, oh, can we contact you in the future about the work of St. John's? Can we keep you in the loop and the process of how our campaign is being developed? Could we tell you more in the future? Get them to give you their email address and address, and get them to opt in for the communications in the future. But ultimately, how should we use all this great community audit work? Definitely to inform your story about your church, the work you do. And I think loads of people do trust and foundations bids. I mean, I feel really sorry sometimes for these trust and foundation reviewers, because they must receive like hundreds of these each week or month. I mean, do stand out, do try and stand out. I mean, St Mary's in rural Norwich, we do great work. We work with a school, and we have a food bank. I mean, that is fundamental. Every church should be doing that, really. What else are you doing? And how can you bring to life your church, your campaign, by the use of people's stories? I think people give money to people. They don't give necessarily to buildings, they give it to people. How's the work you're doing transforming the lives and responding to the needs and the problems of the people living close by to you? I'm not a GDPR expert, so do take your advice from your GDPR officer. But I know there's something called PECA. If you're communicating electronically with people, then there's something beyond GDPR called PECA. Oh, Kevin must be a GDPR compliant person, or is an expert. He's waving to me. Oh, he's gone. He wasn't an expert. He's gone. But I would just suggest, be secure, do comply with everything kind of Data Protection Act, and do get those kind of valuable opt-ins, making sure you're doing everything compliant and storing and processing data to the best that you're able to. So what would be my kind of first steps for you if you've never done this before? How can we take this forward? Well, I would start to design a short questionnaire. So pull together some mostly open, some closed questions. Probably no more than kind of 10 questions. Agree your processes. Who's going to be asking these questions? How are we going to be gathering the data? Is it going to be electronically? Is it going to be hard form? How are we going to make this secure and safe? I think this probably goes beyond one person. You know, formulate a super team who's going to be part of your kind of super team. But I would say just be open to what people are saying to you. I think as churches we have a very sometimes, you know, fixed idea of what we think are um, the problems or what's important to our local area. But just be open to what people are saying about you, your role within the community, and what's important to them, and how can we respond to that. So a quick recap on the most pertinent points. I say really, yeah, look at the data. What is it telling you? What conclusions can we draw from it? And how can this inform your future actions? You know, if you've been really passionate doing loads of stuff for younger people, but actually there's not many younger people in your area, and the need for what people are telling you isn't for younger people, it's for older people, then maybe you need to stop that and actually change how you're putting on services and activities. Maybe you need to change your focus from younger to older, or vice versa. Or maybe it's a completely different thematic area, which I haven't covered today. So you look at what people are telling you and look at the data, and how can this inform your church activities in the future? Just before we pause for any questions, this is how Church Grants helps churches on a day-to-day basis. We can help design your community audit with you. If you've got no idea where to start, we can give you some really great examples around that. Our expertise is actually planning for a major capital appeal. So if you've got one in the offing and you think, well, how do we even start thinking about the fundraising process for that? Then we can gladly help you through those thinking processes. Raising money from trusts and foundations, we write cases of support and practically prepare applications to trusts and foundations. And we also do prospect research as well. So if you've got any of those needs, then do reach out, info@churchgrants.co.uk, and we'll be happy to discuss that with you.